The world doesn't scare you because it's dangerous. The world scares you because of how you've learned to look at it. You weren't born afraid, you weren't born hesitant or cautious or doubtful. You learned to be afraid quietly, gradually, like rain sinking into dry soil, until you didn't even notice the difference between fear and habit. But it begins with a feeling, one that creeps in at the quietest moments, when the noise stops, when the distractions fade, when you're left alone with yourself. That's when the discomfort starts, that's when you feel it. The invisible weight pressing on your chest, not heavy enough to crush you, but just enough to keep you from breathing deeply. It whispers things you don't say out loud, things like, what if they don't like me? What if I fail? What if I never become more than this? And you try to shake it off, you smile, you nod, you distract yourself with work, or conversations, or goals, or scrolling. But it always finds a way back, not because the world is cruel, but because fear has made a home inside you. Fear disguised as responsibility, fear masked as caution, fear hidden beneath every "I'm fine," even when you're not. And the worst part is, you've done it so well, no one sees it. They think you're stable, they think you're normal, some even think you're doing great, but inside you know something feels off, like you're living a script someone else wrote, like you're wearing a costume that fits too tight, like you've built a life so carefully curated that it doesn't even reflect who you truly are anymore. You've memorized your lines, your cues, your smiles, but it's hollow and it's exhausting, and deep down, you know why. Because fear has shaped your every decision, not the dramatic kind of fear, not the scream or run kind, but the quiet, persistent kind, the kind that whispers, stay safe, don't stand out, don't speak up, don't try that, don't be too much or too honest, or too loud. And slowly, you started obeying it without even noticing it. You started shrinking bit by bit, you stopped sharing your real thoughts, you stopped taking risks, you stopped dreaming beyond what felt possible, and you started surviving. Instead of living, you breathe. Yes, you speak. Yes, you show up to work, you make plans, you laugh at the right moments, but you don't feel alive, not truly, not fully. And that is what fear does, it keeps you from aliveness. It convinces you that safety is more valuable than freedom, that predictability is more comforting than possibility, and because of that, you build your life in small ways, careful ways, contained ways, and you justify it. You call it being responsible, you call it being realistic, but in the silence, in the dark, when it's just you and your heartbeat, you know the truth. You know you've traded your courage for comfort, your fire for peace, your voice for acceptance, and that trade didn't make you happy, it made you disappear. And the scariest part is how normal it all feels, how accepted this life of fear has become, and how few people will ever question it because they're doing the same. They're afraid too, they're playing the same game, they're hiding behind the same masks, so no one challenges the fear, no one says, hey, maybe this isn't life, maybe this is a very beautiful prison, with very kind guards, and very quiet suffering. But you feel it, don't you? The ache, the pull, the quiet rebellion inside you, that keeps asking, is this it? Is this really all I came here for? To perform, to conform, to survive? When did living become such a performance? When did you start living for their approval, their opinions, their standards? And what would happen if you stopped? What would happen if you let go of the version of you that never felt like home? And anyway, the one that said yes when you wanted to say no, the one that smiled when you wanted to scream, the one that stayed when your soul was begging to run, that version of you was built by fear. And fear is convincing, fear is persuasive, it knows how to sound like wisdom, it knows how to make you believe that you're being smart, by staying small, but deep down your body knows the truth. Your body tenses when you lie, your body aches when you settle, your body mourns the dreams you buried, and the desires you silenced, and no amount of pretending will ever erase that truth. So the question isn't how do you stop being afraid of the world, the question is how do you stop believing that fear's your friend, how do you stop giving it the final say in your choices, in your relationships, in your future. Because the world is not what you fear, the world is just a mirror. it reflects what you bring into it. It magnifies your beliefs, and if you walk into it carrying doubt and shame and insecurity, it will show you situations that reinforce those things. But if you change your gaze, if you begin to walk with wonder, with curiosity, with courage, the world starts to shift too, not because the world changed, but because you did, and that's the beginning. That's where everything starts. Not when fear leaves, but when you stop bowing to it, when you stop letting it drive, when you stop confusing fear with truth, because the truth is you are not fragile, the truth is you are not too late, or too broken, or too lost. You are simply waking up from a life that was never truly yours, and now you get to choose again, not perfectly, not without trembling, but with your eyes open and your heart ready. And if that's not the beginning of real freedom, then what is? You were not born afraid, you were not born with doubts, clinging to your thoughts, or shame wrapping itself around your voice. You were born open, alive, curious, with a heart that beat without hesitation, and eyes that searched the world with wonder. Fear came later, it was given to you, not in one sudden moment, but piece by piece, moment by moment, word by word. Someone laughed when you spoke your truth, someone ignored you when you showed your pain, someone punished you when you dared to be different, and without knowing it, your soul started to shrink, to fold in on itself, not because you were weak, but because you were trying to survive, because your heart knew early on that the world was not always kind, and you had to protect yourself. So you did, you learned to smile, instead of cry, to nod, instead of speak, to hide, instead of stand, and that fear became your armor, not because you wanted it, but because you believed you needed it. You see, fear is not something you are, it is something you carry, something you learn to wear like a second skin. It wraps itself around your choices and your voice, until you forget what it felt like to move without it. And the tragedy is not that you became afraid, the tragedy is that you began to believe it was you, that the fear was a part of your identity, that it was your nature. But it's not, it never was. It is a ghost, a memory, a shadow of old wounds, that you kept feeding without knowing why. And every time you said I can't, when your heart was whispering, I want to, every time you stepped back, when your soul begged you to step forward, you taught yourself that fear is the guide, that fear knows best, and it does not. It only knows how to limit it, only knows how to whisper, don't do that, don't try that, don't go there, because if you do, you'll be hurt again, you'll be laughed at again, you'll be left again, and maybe you will, maybe the world will still sting and reject and misunderstand. But what fear doesn't tell you, is that you will survive it, that you already have, you've survived, things you never thought you could, and you are still here, you are still breathing, and if that's not proof of your strength, what is? But fear doesn't just shape what you do, it shapes who you think you are. It teaches you to look in the mirror and see not what is true, but what is broken, what is lacking, what is flawed, and so you begin to hide from yourself, not because you are ashamed of who you are, but because you've been told in 1,000 quiet ways that who you are is too much, too soft, too loud, too emotional, too ambitious, too different, and those messages stack up inside you like bricks, and before long you've built a wall between your soul and your life, and you live behind it, smiling through it, laughing through it, convincing everyone, including yourself, that this version of you is fine, but you know it's not. You know, there's a voice inside that never stopped speaking, that never stopped asking, what if I stopped pretending, what if I stopped playing small, what if I took up space and said what I really thought and felt and needed, what if I chose me, what would happen? Then you see, fear is clever, it doesn't always scream, it often whispers. It whispers in small decisions, in delayed dreams, in texts you never send, in ideas you never pursue, in silence you keep, even when everything inside you wants to speak, and it hides behind words like realistic, practical, mature, but really it's just afraid that if you show up as yourself, the world won't love you. And maybe that's true, maybe some people won't, maybe they'll turn away, But that has nothing to do with your worth. It has nothing to do with your truth. Your value was never meant to be measured by the reactions of those too afraid to see their own reflection in you, because that's what real presence does. It mirrors back to others what they've hidden in themselves, and not everyone can handle that. Not everyone will choose to, but that's not your responsibility. Your only responsibility is to choose yourself, to meet your own gaze without flinching, to speak your own truth without softening it for someone else's comfort, because the only life you get to live is your own, and the longer you wait for others to approve it, the more you lose the chance to actually live it. The world didn't teach you to be free, it taught you to be careful. It taught you to fit in, to keep quiet, to be nice, even when it hurts you, to smile, even when you want to scream, and you did it because you wanted to be loved. You did it because you didn't want to be alone, and that's human, that's honest. But now you have to ask yourself, is that love worth the cost of yourself? Is that approval worth the silencing of your soul? Because every time you trade your truth for comfort, you lose a little bit of yourself, and eventually you forget who you were before the pretending, before the edits, and masks, and roles. And now it's time to remember, to unlearn, to return to who you were before the world convinced you to fear your own reflection, before you thought your softness was weakness, before you were told your emotions made you fragile, before they called your dream impossible. You are not fragile, you are not broken. You are not less. You are simply buried under years of conditioning, under layers of fear that were never yours to carry. And now it's time to let them go, not all at once, not perfectly, but intentionally, piece by piece, truth by truth, breath by breath, until you can finally stand in front of yourself and say, I am not afraid to be me, not anymore. And that moment, that breath, that choice is where everything begins again. Anxiety is a word people throw around lightly, but they rarely understand its weight. They rarely know what it feels like to live with it, pulsing beneath your skin, not like a scream, but like a hum, a constant presence that never fully fades. It's the racing heart, when nothing is chasing you, the tight chest, when you're lying in bed, the shallow breath, when you're simply trying to speak. Anxiety doesn't always arrive with panic. Sometimes it comes like silence, like a pressure that you can't explain, like 1,000 small decisions that all feel like life or death. It makes you doubt even the simplest things, like texting back, like going outside, like meeting someone's eyes, because it convinces you that you'll get it wrong, that you'll be judged, that you'll mess up somehow. And it hides behind perfectionism, behind the need to always be productive, to always seem composed and in control. But underneath is the truth. Anxiety is not a weakness, it is a message, a sign that something inside you is not being heard, not being held. And the most cruel part of anxiety is that it makes you feel alone. It makes you believe that you are the only one who feels this way, while everyone else walks around with ease and confidence. But that's not true. What you see on the outside of others is not the truth of what they carry inside. Many are struggling, just like you, but they've learned how to hide it, how to bury it, how to wear the right expressions, and speak the right words. And so you compare your rawness to their performance, and believe you are broken, but you are not. You are just honest, you are just feeling deeply. In a world that has taught people to numb themselves, and that is not a flaw, it is a sign of aliveness, and sensitivity and empathy. It is a part of you that should be honored, not shamed. Anxiety often shows up when everything is quiet, when the distractions are gone, when there is nothing left to do but be with yourself. And in those moments, your thoughts race, your doubts speak loudly, your body tenses as if bracing for an impact that never comes. It's not because you're weak, it's because your mind has been trained to expect danger, to prepare for pain. And when there is no danger, no pain, your body still remembers the fight, still expects the storm. And so you live as if life itself is a battlefield, always on guard, always alert, always afraid. And that way of living is exhausting. It wears down your body, your spirit. Usually it makes rest feel unsafe, and peace feel because anxiety has convinced you that if you stop something bad will happen, and that's the lie, the illusion that motion equals safety, that worry equals control, but it doesn't. Worrying never prevented a storm, it only drained you before it even arrived. So what do you do with this message? What do you do when anxiety shows up? Not as a visitor, but as a constant companion. You listen, not with fear, but with curiosity. You stop running from it, and start understanding it. You ask, what are you trying to tell me? What am I not facing? What pain have I buried so deep that my body has no choice but to scream through symptoms? What part of me is still waiting to be seen? And when you ask with openness, with compassion, the answers begin to rise, and not all at once, but slowly, in glimpses, in tears, in memories. And that's when healing begins, because anxiety is not asking you to be afraid. It's asking you to come home to yourself. It's asking you to stop abandoning your needs, your voice, your truth. It's asking you to stop betraying yourself for approval, for comfort, for routine. You are not your anxiety. You are not your fear. You are not your past. You are the one who notices these things, who feels them, who lives through them. You are the one who breathes beneath the waves, and still rises. And that is your power, your ability to keep going, even when your mind tells you not to, your ability to question, even when the answers scare you, your ability to sit with discomfort, instead of escaping it. That is the beginning of freedom, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it without running away. The willingness to say, I am still here, I am still trying, I am still learning how to hold myself gently. And yes, hurts. It tightens your chest, it interrupts your sleep, it takes the joy out of things that used to light you up, but it also teaches you presence. It teaches you what matters. It teaches you to listen and feel and slow down. It asks you to return to the now, not the what-ifs of the future or the regrets of the past, but the now, the breath, the heartbeat, the ground beneath your feet. And when you return, there you begin to loosen your grip, you begin to soften, and that is when you realize the danger was never out there. The danger was never the world. The danger was the story you told yourself about the world. And that story can be rewritten. That story can be unlearned. Because anxiety is not the truth, it is the alarm, it is the signal, and you have the power to choose what comes next. You have the power to meet that signal, with understanding, not panic, with love, not shame, with presence, not avoidance. And when you do, you start to feel different, not all at once, not perfectly, but surely you begin to feel like you again, and that feeling is worth every moment of courage it takes to get there. Control is the illusion we all secretly chase, the silent promise that if we can just plan enough, predict enough, prepare enough, we will finally be safe. We will finally be free from pain, from chaos, from the unknown. We build routines, we make lists, we study every outcome in our heads before we act. Then we call it wisdom, we call it being responsible, but in truth, it's fear, dressed in logic. It's fear pretending to be order. Because somewhere deep inside we believe that if we can control everything, nothing can hurt us again, nothing can surprise us again. But life was never meant to be controlled. It was meant to be experienced, and that's where the pain begins. The pain of realizing that, no matter how much you try, no matter how much you grip life with both hands, and refuse to let go, it still shifts, it still changes, it still moves like water through your fingers. And the harder you hold on, the more it slips away. Because control is not peace, it is pressure, it is tension, it is fear, keeping you frozen in the illusion that you can avoid discomfort by avoiding uncertainty. But uncertainty is the only thing that is truly certain. Every day, you wake up, not knowing what will happen, not knowing who will stay, who will leave, what will break, what will bloom. And that truth is terrifying. If you try to resist it, but it becomes liberating. If you learn to accept it, if you stop fighting what you cannot hold, and start flowing, with what comes without needing to label it or own it, or fix it, because the obsession with control is what makes life feel like a battle, when really it could be a dance. Think about how often you've stayed awake, imagining all the worst-case scenarios, thinking that by doing so, you're somehow protecting yourself, but all you're doing is suffering in advance, feeling pain. Hasn't happened, exhausting your body for storms that may never come. And when you do this long enough, your nervous system forgets how to rest it, forgets how to feel safe in stillness. It forgets how to trust the moment, and so you live in hypervigilance, waiting for the next bad thing, unable to enjoy the good things, because they might disappear, and that is the cost of control. It's not safety. It's the loss of peace, it's the loss of presence, it's the loss of joy, and beneath that need for control is something even deeper. The fear of uncertainty, the fear of not knowing, the fear of being caught off guard, and that fear makes sense, because maybe you were hurt before, when you didn't see it coming, maybe you were broken by something you couldn't prepare for, and now every part of you wants to make sure that never happens again. So you build mental armor, you try to predict every twist and turn, you try to think your way into safety, but all that thinking just becomes another prison, another weight, because real peace doesn't come from control, it comes from surrender, and surrender is not giving up, it's giving in, it's letting go of the fantasy that you can plan your way out of pain, and instead, learning to trust that you can survive it, that you can move through it, that you can grow from it. You see, the ego hates uncertainty, the ego wants answers, it wants control, it wants everything to make sense, but life is not a formula, life is a mystery, and the more you try to force it into your shape, the more you miss its magic, because the truth is control never existed, not really, not in the way we imagine it. We never had full control over outcomes, or people, or timing, and we never will, and the sooner we face that, the sooner we find peace, because peace is not having all the answers, peace is knowing that you don't need them, peace is trusting that you will meet whatever comes with grace, with strength, with presence, and when you stop trying to control everything, you begin to feel lighter, you begin to breathe deeper, you begin to notice things, the sound of the wind, the warmth of the sun, the taste of your coffee, the way your heart softens when you stop bracing for impact. Because you are no longer fighting the moment, you are living it, you are no longer performing safety, you are allowing life to unfold, and that is where real safety begins. Not in prediction but in presence, not in control, but in connection to yourself, to the now, and maybe letting go scares you, maybe it feels like falling, but what if it's more like flying? What if everything you were trying to control was only keeping you from soaring? What if your need to grip every part of life was the only thing keeping you from being fully alive? Because control is not strength, it's fear, fear of the unknown, fear of loss, fear of change, and while those fears are valid, they do not need to run your life, they do not need to make your choices for you. So take a breath and feel the space between your thoughts, feel the stillness beneath the noise, feel the ground beneath your feet, and ask yourself, what am I trying so hard to hold, that I am no longer able to live? What part of me believes that controlling everything will finally bring peace? And what would happen if I stopped believing that? What would happen if I trusted that I don't need to control life in order to feel safe? I just need to meet it as I am, moment by moment, breath by breath, truth by truth, and maybe for the first time you let yourself be held by life, instead of trying to hold it. Maybe you open your hands, and let the wind pass through them. Maybe you smile, not because everything is certain, but because you no longer need it to be, because you are learning to live not in fear, but in trust, and that is the most powerful thing you will ever do. The mind can be loud, chaotic, overflowing with thoughts, but the body, it speaks differently, whispers, it tightens, it trembles, it aches, and when you live in a state of constant anxiety or fear, the first thing you begin to lose is the connection to your body, because the mind takes over, spinning stories, racing through possibilities, trying to predict outcomes, trying to stay ahead of anything that might go wrong, and in all that noise, the body is forgotten, treated like a machine, expected to keep going, to keep moving, to keep functioning, regardless of the storm raging within. but the body remembers. The body holds the truth even when the mind lies, even when the mouth smiles, even when the words say I'm fine. The body tells a different story, and most of the time we don't want to hear it, because listening means feeling, and feeling means facing, and facing means changing. But if you keep running from what your body is trying to tell you, it doesn't go away, it gets louder. It starts with fatigue, with tension in your neck and shoulders, with that tight feeling in your chest, that you can't quite name it, continues with stomach pains, with headaches, with insomnia, and we call it stress. We say we're just tired, but what we really are is disconnected, and disconnection is a quiet killer. Slowly drains the color from your life, it slowly numbs your ability to enjoy anything, it makes you feel like a stranger in your own skin. And that is not how you were meant to live. Your body is not your enemy. Your body is not a vessel to push through pain. Your body is your home, your guide, your map. It tells you where you are. It tells you what you need. It tells you when something is wrong, and when something is right, but only if you are willing to listen. And listening doesn't mean analyzing it, doesn't mean fixing, it doesn't mean diagnosing it. Listening means presence. It means stillness. It means breathing deep enough to feel what's underneath the surface. It means honoring the ache, without rushing to silence it. It means asking your body, what are you trying to show me? What have I ignored? What have I avoided? What have I refused to feel? And when you ask that with compassion, your body starts to soften it, starts to release all the fear, all the pain, all the sadness that it has been holding for you, all the emotions that you didn't feel safe enough to feel at the time. And the release is not always comfortable. It might come through tears, through shaking, through deep exhaustion, but it is not weakness, it is not breaking, it is healing, it is coming home to yourself. You see, emotions don't live in the mind, they live in the body. Fear lives in your chest, in your breath, in your heartbeat. Anger lives in your fists, in your jaw, in your neck. Grief lives in your back, in your shoulders, in your stomach. And when you don't allow yourself to feel those things, they don't disappear. They just get stuck, and stuck energy becomes pain. Stuck emotions become symptoms. And so the healing begins when you stop treating your body like something to manage, and start treating it like something to trust. When you stop asking your mind to explain everything, and start letting your body show you the truth, the raw truth. The one that's not filtered by logic or fear, or social expectations. The one that says I am tired, I am hurt, I am scared, I am ready. And when you reconnect with your body, you reconnect with the present, because the body only lives here and now. The mind, it travels through time, it gets stuck in the past, it gets lost in the future. But the body, it breathes, now it feels, now it exists, now. And if you can drop into it, even for a moment, you'll find something that your mind cannot offer you. Peace, not because everything is okay, but because you are finally okay. Being with yourself, you are finally okay. Not knowing you are finally okay. Not controlling, and that okayness is not passive. It is powerful because it means you are no longer at war with your own existence. And that's what fear and anxiety often are. They are internal wars fought in silence, fought in isolation. And the battleground is your body. But you can choose to end the war, not by defeating fear, not by erasing anxiety, but by befriending them, by listening to them, by allowing them to move through you, instead of building walls against them. And that begins with presence. It begins with breath. It begins with the simple act of placing a hand on your heart, and saying, I'm here, I'm not leaving, I'm listening. And the more you do that, the more your body will begin to trust you again. The more it will begin to relax, to open, to feel. And that is how you return to life, not through the mind, but through the body, not through analysis, but through awareness, not through resistance, but through surrender. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, don't just think, pause, breathe, feel, ask your body, where does it hurt, where does it pull, where does it clench, and then be with that part, like you would with a child who is scared, or a friend who is grieving. Offer it warmth, attention, softness, and in that space you begin to heal, not because the world outside has changed, but because the world inside has become safe again. and when your inner world is safe, the outer world no longer feels like such a threat, because you are no longer abandoning yourself, because you are finally on your own side. There is a trap that looks nothing like fear at first glance. In fact, it often looks like success, like motivation, like discipline. It looks like long hours, full calendars, endless to-do lists, and a drive to always be achieving something. But underneath it, if you pause and look closely, what you will find is fear. Fear disguised as productivity, fear disguised as ambition, fear that tells you if you stop, you'll fall apart, fear that tells you if you slow down, you'll be left behind. It's not easy to admit, because being busy is rewarded, it's admired. People will look at your packed schedule and say you're doing great. They'll say you're so driven, so focused, but what they don't see is how often your drive is running from something, not towards something. And that's the part, no one talks about that. So many of our accomplishments are not born from inspiration, but from anxiety, not from passion, but from panic. We do not always work because we love the work. We work because we're afraid to rest. We're afraid to hear the silence. We're afraid of what might surface if we stop moving, because in that stillness, in that quiet, is the emptiness, the questions, the truths we've been avoiding, and so we fill our days, and our hours, and our lives, with movement, with doing, with noise, so we never have to hear what our soul is trying to say. And this is how fear becomes a habit. It becomes so familiar, so ingrained, that we don't even recognize it anymore. We think we're being productive, but we're actually running. We think we're making progress, but we're actually escaping. We think we're growing, but we're only expanding our ability to avoid. And the body knows, the body always knows. It gets tired, it gets tense, it breaks down, not because we are weak, but because we were never meant to live this way. Always striving, never resting, always proving, never simply being. And the truth is, you are not lazy, you are not unmotivated, you are tired, you are overwhelmed, you are afraid. And instead of listening to that fear, you try to outrun it, you try to outperform it, you try to cover it with achievements and appearances and success stories that look good from the outside, but feel empty on the inside. And the reason this kind of fear is so dangerous is because it's socially accepted, even celebrated. People will admire your hustle, they will praise your hard work, they will applaud your ability to do it all. But they won't see the nights you can't sleep, the constant tightness in your chest, the way your joy has quietly slipped away, because you were too busy to notice. They won't see how your identity has become so entangled with your productivity that you no longer know who you are without it. And that is the deepest loss of all. Not the time, not the energy, but the self that got buried beneath all the doing. The self that never got a chance to simply exist without needing to prove its worth. So the question is not, how can I do more? The question is, why do I feel like I always need to? The question is, what am I afraid will happen if I stop? What am I afraid I will have to face if I slow down? What am I running from? And most importantly, what would it feel like to stop? Not forever, not completely, but just long enough to breathe, long enough to check in, long enough to ask yourself, am I doing this because it aligns with my truth, or because I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't? And if the answer is fear, then it's time to pause, it's time to listen, it's time to give yourself permission to rest, not as a reward, not as something you earn, but as something you deserve, simply because you are alive, because rest is not weakness. It is not failure, it is not quitting. Rest is medicine, rest is connection, rest is the moment your soul catches up with your body, and they remember how to be whole again. And yes, rest can be terrifying if you've lived your whole life measuring your value by what you produce. If you've been told that worth comes from doing, not being, then stopping feels like disappearing. It feels like failure, but it's not. It's healing. It's truth. It's remembering that you were not put on this earth to be a machine. You were not born to be efficient. You were born to feel, to love, to grow, to laugh, to explore, to create, to rest. You were born to be human, and humans are not meant to run forever. They are meant to move with rhythm, with seasons, with ebb and flow, and when you forget that, you begin to suffer. Not because you're broken, but because you are out of sync with your nature. So let yourself rest. Let yourself be slow. Let yourself do nothing, not as a way to escape, but as a way to return. Because when you come back to stillness, when you come back to presence, you begin to hear what your heart has been trying to tell you all along. And maybe it says I miss you, and maybe it says I need you, and maybe it says I've been waiting for you to come home. And that is the voice worth listening to. Not the voice that says you're not enough, not the voice that says keep going, until you crash, but the voice that says you are enough, even now, especially now. And it is safe to stop, it is safe to feel, it is safe to be. There is something very few people ever stop to question, something so deeply woven into the fabric of who we believe we are, that it becomes invisible, and that is identity. Identity sounds solid, it sounds like truth, it sounds like this is who I am, but more often than not, what we call identity is not truth. It is a survival strategy. It is a collection of beliefs, behaviors and patterns we adopted to stay safe, to be accepted, to avoid pain and rejection. Over time, we begin to believe that these strategies are who we are, but they are not. They are who we became. To protect the parts of us we thought the world could not handle. You say I am shy, but maybe that's because you were punished for speaking up. You say I am cold, but maybe that's because warmth was once taken advantage of. You say I am strong and independent, but maybe that's because no one was ever there to depend on. And so you built your identity, not out of choice, but out of necessity. And the tragedy is not that you had to do that. The tragedy is that you forgot you were doing it, and you started living a life based on a version of yourself that was never fully true, only safe and safety. Powerful. Safety is addictive, because it feels like love. It feels like belonging, even if it's fake, even if it's conditional, and so you cling to your identity. Not because it's who you are, but because you are afraid of what you'll find without it. Who are you without the achievements, without the mask, without the role you play for others? And the truth is that question is terrifying, because it requires letting go. It requires stepping into the unknown. It requires saying maybe I am not who I always thought I was. Maybe there's more to me than what I've allowed myself to see. But fear tells you to hold on. Fear says don't let go of this identity, because at least you know it. At least you can predict it. At least it's familiar. And so you stay in the same patterns, the same habits, the same relationships, even if they hurt, even if they keep you small, because small is familiar, and familiar feels safe. But you didn't come here to be safe. You came here to be real, to be whole, to be free, and freedom does not come from holding on. Freedom comes from questioning everything, from asking who told me this is who I am, who taught me to be this way, who convinced me that I had to earn love, or prove my worth, or hide my truth. And when you start asking those questions, everything begins to shift. You start to see the cracks in your identity. You start to see the ways you've been performing instead of living. And that is not weakness. That is awakening, that is courage. Because it takes real bravery to look at yourself and say maybe I've been wrong, maybe I've been living someone else's story, maybe I've been playing a role that no longer fits, and I am allowed to change. I am allowed to grow. I am allowed to become someone new, because you are not meant to stay the same. You are not meant to freeze in time and live out one version of yourself forever. You are meant to evolve, to unfold, to shed old skins, and write new chapters. And every time you do that, it will feel like death. The death of an old identity, the death of a familiar self. But on the other side is rebirth. On the other side is the version of you that has been waiting patiently to be seen. The version of you that doesn't need to hide, or pretend or shrink. The version of you that is wild and true, and alive. And yes, it's scary to let go. It's scary to walk away from who you've always been, even if that version of you was never happy, because unhappy and known can feel safer than happy and unknown. But that is the cost of staying in an old identity. You never get to meet the real you. You never get to discover who you are beyond your wounds, beyond your fears, beyond your conditioning, and the world needs that version of you. The world doesn't need more people pretending to be okay. The world needs people who are real, who are honest, who are willing to break open and become more than they were told they could be. So, if you feel the pull to change, if you feel the restlessness, the ache, the quiet voice inside that keeps whispering there's more, listen to it, trust it, follow it, even if it takes you away from what you've always known, because your identity is not a cage, it's not a label, it's not a permanent tattoo, it's a doorway, and you get to walk through it as many times as you need to. You get to recreate yourself endlessly, you get to explore all the different versions of who you can be, and that is not instability, that is not confusion, that is freedom, that is growth. And remember, fear will always show up when you try to change, because change threatens the ego, and the ego is obsessed with survival. But you are more than your ego, you are more than your past, you are more than what others expect from you, you are a living, breathing, evolving miracle, and you are allowed to grow beyond the version of you that fear built. You are allowed to take off the armor, even if it's heavy, even if it feels like home, because what's underneath is not weakness, what's underneath is your essence, and your essence is enough. So stand in front of them, not to judge, not to critique, not to perform, but to see, to really see the person behind the masks, behind the pain, behind the stories, and ask, who are you really? And whatever answer comes, trust it, even if it's just silence, even if it's just tears, because those tears are truth. Those tears are the first sign that the old you is softening, and the real you is waking up. Fear is not the end of the story, it is the beginning. It is not the wall that blocks you, it is the door that invites you to cross into something bigger, deeper, more real. Fear is not the enemy, it is the signpost, it is the signal that says here is where your truth lives, here is where your courage is needed, here is where you stop running and start living. And yet most people turn around when fear shows up. Most people see fear and think it means stop, danger, don't go further. But what if fear is not there to stop you? What if fear is there to guide you, to lead you toward the part of yourself you have not yet discovered? Because fear only shows up when you are about to become more than you were. Fear only rises when you are at the edge of change, the edge of growth, the edge of becoming. And so, when you feel fear, it is not a sign that you are weak, it is a sign that you are alive, and standing at the threshold of something real. And yes, crossing that threshold will shake you. Yes, it will make your voice tremble, your hands sweat, your heart race. But that is not failure, that is expansion, that is evolution, that is what it means to become who you truly are. And the thing is, life does not ask you to be fearless. It asks you to be present, it asks you to show up, it asks you to feel it, all the terror, the wonder, the risk, the possibility, because that is what it means to live fully, to live with your heart, open your eyes wide, and wake. And fear is part of that, it always will be, but fear does not have to control you, fear does not have to write your story. You can feel it, acknowledge it, honor it, and still move. You can walk with fear, without letting it decide where you go, and when you do that, something incredible happens. You begin to reclaim your power, not the kind of power that dominates or controls, but the quiet kind, the kind that lives in your breath, in your choices, in your truth, the kind of power that says, I see the fear, and I choose to love myself. Anyway, I see the fear and I still speak, I still try, I still show up, and that is the power that changes everything. That is the power that rewrites the story, not just for you, but for everyone who sees you rise. Because your life is not just yours, it is a ripple. Everything you do, every choice you make, every truth you speak, becomes a permission slip for someone else to do the same. Your healing is not selfish, your courage is not small, your willingness to face your fear is a light that helps others see through their own darkness. And that is how we change the world. Not with perfection but with presence, not with control, but with honesty, not with certainty, but with courage. So if you are standing at the edge right now, if you are feeling the fear rise, like a tide in your chest, if you are questioning, if you are ready. The answer is you are not ready, in the sense that everything is figured out, or safe, or clear, but you are ready, in the sense that your soul is calling, and you can feel it, that stirring, that ache, that deep, knowing that there is more for you, that you are meant to live, not survive, that you are meant to feed, not numb, that you are meant to rise, not shrink, and yes, choosing that path will cost you. It will cost you your comfort, your illusions, your masks, your lies. It will cost you the version of yourself that played small to make others feel okay. But what you gain is beyond measure. You gain your voice, your peace, your truth, yourself. You gain the kind of freedom that can't be bought or given, only claimed. And that freedom is waiting for you on the other side of fear. So ask yourself, are you living the life you chose or the life you were taught to survive? Are you waking up with purpose or just going through the motions? Are you speaking from your truth or just echoing what others want to hear? And if the answer scares you, let it shake you, let it wake you, because that fear is not the problem. That fear is the beginning of your return to yourself, and beyond that fear is joy, is love, is peace, is possibility. You are not broken, you are awakening, you are not lost, you are unfolding, you are not too late, you are right on time. The moment you choose yourself, again and again and again, and it will not be perfect, and it will not be easy, but it will be real, and real is what your soul has been begging for, not more pretending, not more performing, but truth, and truth begins when fear no longer leads, when fear becomes the signal, not the steering wheel. So breathe into that fear, walk toward what scares you, not because you want to be afraid, but because you want to be free. And freedom lives where fear once stood. Freedom lives where you say, I choose myself, anyway, I love myself, anyway, I trust myself, anyway. And from that place, everything changes, everything opens, everything becomes possible. This is not the end of your story, this is the return to it. The moment you stop handing the pen to your fear and start writing from your truth, from your heart, from your knowing, and what you will create from that place will not only change your life, it will remind others that they can, too. Because when you are no longer guided by fear, the world becomes not a threat, but a playground, not a prison, but a canvas, not a test, but a gift, and you are finally free to live it.